Hello, my name is David Fox. Welcome to another episode of the Business of Higher Education podcast. Today we're going to be delving into a topic that is getting a lot of attention, deservedly so, which is continuing education programs and the need to create lifelong learning in Canadian institutions. Now, it's widely reported that many universities and colleges across Canada are experiencing significant drops in student enrollment, largely due to recent shifts in immigration policy by the federal government. In the past year, the Government of Canada has introduced stricter immigration rules aiming for zero growth in terms of international student numbers. The company Apply Board, however, is projecting that these reforms could lead to a 47% decline in approved Canadian work-study permits, and that would surpass in 2024 the government's own target of a 35% reduction. This marks a very sharp turnaround from the dramatic growth in international students between 2000 and 2023. The company Higher Education Strategy Associates reported that by 2022-2023, international students made up 18% of university enrollments in Canada and 24% of college student enrollments in Canada. Now, those are very big numbers in Canadian higher education. Additionally, institutional revenues increased between 2001-2002 and 2022-2023. They grew total revenue, as reported by Higher Education Strategy Associates, they grew by 74%. But this revenue growth was primarily tied to students, since another source of funding, which is the government funding stagnated around 2008. As of 2016, Higher Education Strategy Associates reports that tuition fees surpassed government funding as the primary source of income, with international student fees responsible for virtually all the increased operational spending since 2010. Now, the sharp decrease in international students poses a severe financial crisis for Canadian universities and colleges. So the question, the urgent question, is what to do. Now, post-secondary institutions have certain options in terms of addressing financial crises and trying to increase revenue. First option would be cutting. So cutting in budgets, cutting spending, cutting perhaps staff, cutting perhaps programming. Another alternative would be increasing tuition. First of all, in Ontario, there's been a tuition freeze for some time, and that tuition freeze is planned to continue for the next 2 to 3 years. But also there's increased sensitivity by students to higher education fees. A third option in terms of generating revenue in post-secondary education is seeking alternative streams of revenue. And this can include a whole bunch of different things, different approaches. But what we're going to focus on today is the continuing education and how continuing education enters the conversation here in terms of funding. Once considered peripheral, continuing education is now becoming a core strategic focus for universities and colleges worldwide. So the traditional university and college student population, that would be those aged 18 to 22, is shrinking. There will be an increase down the road, but we're not there yet. So with the reduction in terms of traditional student populations and the reduction in terms of international student enrollment, universities and colleges have to pivot towards lifelong learning, targeting adult learners, non-traditional learners, seeking to upskill or reskill. I recently read about the University of North Florida, which has successfully bucked enrollment declines by, in its own words, becoming Jacksonville's primary lifelong learning provider. Now, UNF offers programs for learners of all ages, ranging from high school dual enrollment, which some Canadian institutions are currently offering, to professional certificates for skill advancement and job shifting for mid and late career learners. These continuing education programs and lifelong learning is particularly important when we look at an international survey which was conducted by Carrington Crisp, in which that firm found that 77% of employers plan to implement lifelong learning strategies with in-demand fields. So continuing education is really essential now to post-secondary institutions in Canada. It is not optional in order for these institutions to remain competitive. So what are we talking about in Canada here? To remain relevant and competitive, our institutions have to focus on continuing education that aligns both with the local needs as well as global trends. And here are 5 strategies that Canadian institutions can consider adopting in terms of continuing education. First, embracing technology-driven learning. Canadian universities and colleges need to offer programs that focus on in-demand skills and knowledge. For example, project management, data analysis, cloud computing, customer service, accounting, engineering and tech, AI and prompt engineering, human resources, transportation, logistics, healthcare, agriculture, just to name a few. These are high demand fields which also align with the shift in the federal government's skilled occupation policies, albeit that shift was in respect of immigration. So credentials have to be stackable, they have to be flexible, they have to be customizable, and they have to be accessible. Number 2, designing with e-commerce in mind. Today's learners expect a seamless Amazon-like experience when they're registering for courses. There needs to be an emphasis on this seamless experience because many university and college systems aren't optimized for this purpose. Canadian institutions have to move to modernize their systems to allow students to browse, to enroll, to pay for courses, to set up appointments with ease, meeting the students where they are, and most of them are online right now. Fortune, in this case, favors the fleet of foot. Number 3, create transparent and consistent pricing models. A report from the Online and Professional Education Association highlights that many continuing education programs lack consistent pricing, leading to confusion amongst learners. Canadian institutions have to create standardized, transparent tuition and fee structures to build trust and to ease the decision-making process for prospective students. Number 4, forging partnerships with industry leaders and other institutions. Incorporating industry-recognized certifications into curricula ensures relevance. For example, partnering with a human resources regulatory body or with companies like Microsoft or Google to embed certifications into programs. Canadian universities have to increase these partnerships, aligning their offerings with employer needs. Post-secondary institutions also should expand on existing partnerships with other institutions, which may already have existing in-demand continuing education programming and expertise in certain fields. Creating mutually beneficial programming offers students choice, which they want. It also offers them pathways, which they also want, while not requiring every institution to reinvent every spoke on the continuing education wheel. Collaboration is the buzzword, which can increase the competitiveness of all institutional participants. 5. Focus on lifelong learning for local communities. Following the University of North Florida's model, Canadian institutions must position themselves as lifelong learning hubs for communities. By partnering with local industries, chambers of commerce, municipal governments, and other community stakeholders, and creating communities of learning, communities of excellence, communities of inquiry, our institutions can offer targeted programming that addresses the specific needs of regional labor markets, but also addresses the specific needs of socioeconomics. Whether it's helping high school students get a head start, designing programming to aid members of the Canadian Armed Forces, working with newcomers to Canada, further integrating the knowledge and life experiences of retirees and seniors into learning opportunities, designing programming for creating access and reducing barriers for narrow and physically diverse community members, or assisting adults in reskilling. Universities and colleges have to embed themselves in their communities. The final point that I would make is, in my opinion, Canadian institutions need to be more deliberate and aggressive. The continuing education space in Canada and worldwide is very quickly filling up, with many institutions offering micro-credentials, certificates, diplomas, digital badges, and other learning opportunities. In addition to these institutions, there are many online platforms that are offering free or low-cost learning opportunities. Canadian post-secondary institutions have to be more deliberate, more aggressive, visible, and creative in terms not only of distinguishing the value of their continuing education programs, but also in terms of their promotion and recruitment for those programs. So, where does this leave us? The future of Canadian higher education lies in creating sustainable and adaptable continuing education programs. As we've seen with the University of North Florida, and there are other examples, lifelong learning doesn't just help boost enrollment, it ensures that institutions stay relevant in a rapidly changing world. For Canadian universities and colleges, success will depend on balancing local needs with global trends, using technology to deliver innovative, relevant, accessible, and affordable education aligned with workforce demands. Thank you very much for joining me on this episode. If you have comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks.